the students. There you go. I'm not going to start again, I promise. So you can tell me the name of this magnificent waterfall. Like I said, I'm going to be objective. Dave? Angel Falls, Angel Falls. And you know, when you do a search in Google or DuckDuckGo for images from Venezuela, you're going to get this one. Is Angel Falls. Uh, but it actually has a it's like, you know, it has a, you know, Terecapoco and Maru is Angel Falls, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to start by giving you a geographical orientation as to where Venezuela is. Sometimes people don't even know where it is. I said to friends in the past, people that I just met, I'm Doug, I'm from Venezuela. Next time I meet them, they say, hey, Doug, how is Argentina? You know, so it's not as prevalent in people's consciousness as Argentina for obvious reasons. Um, but I wanted to show you that it's the northernmost country in South America. It has, you know, the northern border is the Caribbean Sea. To the southwest is Colombia. To the southeast is Brazil, and then the Guyanas on the east side. I want you to think ahead. I mentioned the word exodus. And I've talked to people who walked on foot from Venezuela to Peru. I wanted to give you a sense of the majority of the exodus that's happening in Venezuela right now is, you know, on foot or by taking buses all the way throughout South America. We have an exodus into the United States, but it's of a much smaller nature. I wanted you to start thinking ahead about what exodus means and how it happened. On the right is a map of Venezuela. I tried to highlight some of the things I'm going to talk about. The Angel Falls is on the southeastern part of the country, and the Tepuy country, the Tabletop Mountain area. In the Amazonas in the south, we have the famous Yanomami indigenous group. I'm from Maracaibo, which is on the northwest. If you see that, the lake on the left, Lake Maracaibo. I'm from Maracaibo, was born in 55. It's a big oil town, big oil town. Although it's losing its precedence because now there's more oil on the eastern side of the country. What can I say? And then we have the guy on a horse. I put it there because it comes from the area called the plains of Venezuela. So we have the northernmost tip of the Andes Mountains on the southwest corner. We have plains, we have jungle in the south. We have beaches on the front, on the northern border. We have oil everywhere. And that is the story of Venezuela, because Venezuela has been an oil-dependent country since the 1920s. So why was Venezuela named Venezuela? And it's a story that has been, you know, it appears to be a myth, but on the other hand, I think it's historically accurate. So Columbus came to Venezuela in 1498, August 1st, 9 o'clock. Well, the 9 o'clock is my part. But so what Columbus really did was to open the door to European, you know, travelers. I can call that, if I can use that word, I'm being nice. But Amerigo Vespucci came as an explorer in 1505. And he saw these little houses on stilts near my hometown, Maracaibo. And it reminded him of Venice. And I'm going, really? So I looked for images of Venice, and the one on the left is the one that came up all the time. And it is kind of a strange painting, because I think the Pope is sort of wading in waist deep water, blessing something. And there's a lot of people there looking at what seems to be a religious ceremony. So I call this an early European sarcasm, because when he saw the houses on stilts, he said, oh, I'm going to call this Little Venice. And Little Venice in Italian was Venezuela. And it turned into Venezuela when Spanish became the regular language. So now you know where Venezuela comes from, the name. Some trivia thing that you might have to answer. And I meant to say that those structures are called palafito. Palafito, they're still around. The palafito architecture, I'm sure the early builders of those houses on stilts never thought of themselves as architects, but it's architecture. And it's still alive and breathing. It has been around for 5,000 years, the palafitos. And today, there is a barrio, neighborhood, a nice word for it. I came up from a barrio. My barrio is next to the dump. And people had to walk through our barrio to get to the dump. And sometimes they will drop their trash in front of my house. But that's another story. But Santa Rosa de Agua is a barrio next to my barrio. And we used to visit there all the time. I used to remember playing near the water. Something like that? No. Going from house to house or going to restaurants and stuff. So it's a very lively neighborhood. It's called Santa Rosa de Agua. Agua is water. Santa Rosa is just the name of the barrio. So a little bit about me, born in 55. I give up my age. I attended private elementary school for 5 years because my dad, hello? My dad made a living by selling coffee on street corner. He will take a big thermos full of coffee in the morning, go to this very corner on this picture, and we'll have a lot of coffee cups, and he will stop people and say, "Hey, would you like some cafecito," which is a small cup of coffee. And that's how he made a living. When I was 8, 9 years old, I remember getting on the bus with his lunch by myself, taking the bus to this corner. I said, "Dad, here's a lunch." "Okay, thanks, I'm going home now." So that's how he made a living. But I call this a coffee fund because somehow he put me through private elementary school for 5 years until my brothers grew. I'm the oldest. My dad said, "I cannot afford to put you all guys through private elementary school." So we switched to a public high school. And then I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to England to study science. I did my degree in physics and math. And then after I returned, I went to Japan on a research scholarship. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And then on a research scholarship in Japan, that I met my wife, Allison, who's in the back with my family. And then I came to UCSC, but by the time I had passed my PhD orals, I had a daughter, my daughter who's in the back, and we all said, I've been a professional student for too long. It's time to get a job. So that's basically what happened. So in a family of 8, typical of my generation, and this is my family on the right, the 8 of us, with my dad, who's no longer with us. My dad has an interesting story. He ran away from home when he was 14. He lived in the Andes, planting his own crop. But he ran away from home and ended up in Maracaibo, where I was born. And he was homeless for a few years. He was homeless and he relied on the kindness of others, but he also had a hard work ethic. Really, he worked really, really hard. And by that, I mean, he will stand in front of the supermarket and helping people carry groceries to their cars. And then he got to know people that way. And then they say, "Hey, Horacio," but that's Horacio, can you give us a hand? At home, we have things to do for you. So that's how he survived, started to sell coffee, met my mother. And then the coffee fund, I have to be honest with you guys, I call it the coffee fund. I don't know what else he was doing to put four kids through private elementary school, but I'm gonna think it's just coffee fund. I don't know that history. So my mom married young. She had 6 children by the age of 25. I was born when she was 19. My mother is here on the right, and I'm in constant touch with her via WhatsApp. She's still around. She's 88. I got this picture. It was the only time I could see her whole face. Sometimes I can just see her forehead or the jaw, but it's so we're in constant contact with them via WhatsApp. And a little bit about illiteracy in Venezuela. When I was born, the country was 43% illiterate in 1955. My mother does not know how to read. She used to pretend. I said, "Mom, the newspaper is upside down." So And I compared that to numbers in the US. So in the 1955, the minority, the minority in the US had 8 to 10% illiteracy. So just sort of to compare where we were in terms of literacy between Venezuela and the United States. So when I was born, my mother does not know how to read. Many parents who came from the Andes in particular, they didn't know how to read. So I asked ChatGPT to make a graphic. I wanted to put a cartoon in here to illustrate the power of literacy. And he came up with this nice graphic, you know, books flying all over the place, pigeons and stars. And then look at what it says at the bottom. The power of literacy. So what does that tell you? It tells you that even AI is illiterate. So I would say be very careful when you use AI. So history, a lot of history. I'm going to do my best to go through this, give you a sample of each. Pre-Columbian means before Columbus came, August 1st, 1498, 9 a.m. Spanish rule doesn't immediately begin in 1498, but the first city founded by the Spanish was built in Cumaná, eastern side, in 1522. That's the oldest city in Venezuela. Then the Venezuelan independence happened between 1810 and 1830. Then we have the caudillo rule. Caudillo basically is different to a dictator. It's essentially a dictator, but the caudillos came out of fighters who fought the Spanish colonizers, and they gained power. They were strong men. That's a theme in Venezuela. They wanted to have a strong man in front, power. But caudillo is different from a dictator. A dictator basically takes over using military power from democracies. So caudillo and dictator can mean the same. But caudillo rule from 1830 to 1935, so 105 years of strong men. And then we have a brief democracy with military dictatorship, 36 to 58. From 1958 to 1959, we have the only real continuous democratic period in Venezuela, guys. 40 years. The United States has how many? Almost 250 or so. And then from 1999 to the present, the two democratic system tumbled down, and Hugo Chavez came into the picture. So before the Spanish arrived, there were plenty of indigenous groups surviving in Venezuela and in the neighboring countries, same as in the US. I'm going to mention typically on the northwest corner, the Wayu indigenous group, or what we call in Maracaibo, Guajiros, los Guajiros or Guajiras. They are still very much prevalent today in my hometown. They put together markets. They don't mingle so well with the rest of the city. They still keep to themselves, maybe for a good reason. But in the 2011 census, the top bar, I know it's very small, I apologize, but the top bar on the right indicates that the larger number of the Wayu or Guajiro population in my home state on the northwest side. So indigenous groups exist in Venezuela today. Remember, when Columbus came, there was no empire like the Incas. There's nothing like that. It was a conglomeration of indigenous group. Didn't really have any power. And just some pictures of the Guajiro Indians, Guajiro indigenous group. I don't want to call them Indians. And we have the Arawak. So this is more of the Arawak thought, this is for a celebration. They dress up. And this is more of a mix between the Caribs and the Arawak. So, by the way, the Carib chiefdoms that existed not only in Venezuela, but in the area in the Caribbean, the Caribs gave birth to the word Caribbean. And Carib means, fierce warrior. So I imagine the fierce warriors gave the Spanish a hell of a hard time. So the Caribbean Sea comes from the Carib indigenous group. Okay, jump into Spanish rule. Again, one side, 1498, the minute they saw land, to 1821. By 1717, Venezuela was part of a large nation called the Gran Colombia. We have Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador all together as one unit. And the Spanish decided to create a viceroyalty. So the largest, the highest administrative title was being the viceroyal in South America. Venezuela was part of this Spanish administrative region. But there was a captain general, the highest Spanish, commander in Venezuela, who started in 1777, but it didn't last very long because they were deposed in 1810. So when the topmost commander, the Spanish topmost commander came to Venezuela in 1777, well, by 1810, they were gone. They were gone. What I wanted to say briefly is that the Spanish created these administrative regions, but really they created the regions to benefit the Spanish companies. The local landowners were not happy. The local Venezuelans or Colombians were not happy that the Spanish crown was only interested in promoting the Spanish businesses. So that's a bit of a revolt from the local landowners. So keep in mind that this Gran Colombia in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and what is Panama today. So I think closed captions may be obscuring some, but it's okay. But the biggest name you probably have heard of, Simón Bolívar, was born in Caracas, born in Venezuela. He was a direct descendant of the Spanish-born conquerors. You know, he was very wealthy, and he was sent to Europe to study. You can see his uniform is very militaristic and very European. He decided to join the independence in 1810. He lost 2 wars of independence. He was not a saint. He handed over his main general, in exchange for his freedom after the second battle of independence. But finally defeated the Spanish in 1821, with a lot of help of British mercenaries. I know we have some British people here. I think maybe Rosemary, you're here. A lot of British mercenaries came in handy. British mercenaries were guns for hire. They were in every battle of independence. So it is said that he liberated a total of 5 countries on horseback. And a funny story, not so funny, is that Hugo Chavez decided to exhume the body of Simón Bolívar in 1810. On live television, they opened the coffin up. They looked at the bones. They did some forensic examination because Chavez believed that he was assassinated in 1830, right? To prove a point that Bolívar was assassinated by what is called Colombia back then. Well, there was no evidence found whatsoever. Everybody saw the bones on national television. I think it was basically Hugo Chavez for using it as a symbolic to bolster his own movement. Politicians will do whatever it takes, right? So a quick map of countries liberated by Bolívar and his generals. It's still 5 countries at the time: Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, but Panama was part of Colombia then, so it really is 6 countries. He rode approximately 75,000 miles on horseback. They call him Iron Ass. But 75,000 miles is 3 times the circumference of the Earth on horseback. For some reason, he didn't want to take a ship down the Pacific coast. He wanted to be on horseback. He wanted to meet the people as he went through the villages. So credit to him for doing that. So after Bolívar died in 1830, the Venezuela became independent from the Gran Colombia. The Gran Colombia was a conglomerate of 3 countries, and Bolívar wanted to create a bigger federation like the United States, but nobody wanted that. So in Venezuela in 1830, this guy in the middle, Juan Jose Antonio Páez, became the first caudillo. Right? Remember, dictator, caudillo. It breaks from the Gran Colombia. And he starts a line of caudillos going for until 1935. Of course, I'm skipping a bunch of federal wars and stuff that happened in the late 19th century. But for the purposes of this talk, the long line of caudillos begins with this guy, Jose Antonio Paez. And the two gentlemen on the right were two caudillos that were in the early 20th century. The guy on the left is Cipriano Castro, and I'll tell you why that's important. The guy on the right is Juan Vicente Gomez. So the story goes, and this actually happened. Cipriano Castro was a caudillo in charge of Venezuela. He decided to go to Spain to have an operation because he wasn't feeling well. He goes to Spain, has the operation, and Juan Vicente Gomez, who was left behind in charge, refused to let him back into the country. So as another way of snatching power from someone else, send him away and don't allow him back. So Juan Vicente Gomez became very important caudillo for Venezuela. Is under his caudilloship. Can I call that? Can I use that word? I don't think that word exists. Under his caudilloship, he ruled for 27 years. Juan Vicente Gomez. Apparently, I have read a couple of books. In one book, he says that he has 77 children. Prolific guy, I guess. Another book say you have 99. So I will say various readings that I've done from 64 to 99 is obviously abuse of power, was typical of Juan Vicente Gomez. He tortured people. He did what it took. He did what he had to do to keep himself in power. What happened during Juan Vicente Gomez caudilloship? Oil was discovered in 1914. But Venezuela was an agricultural country. Venezuela was exporting cacao beans, coffee, bananas, and nothing industrial. But overnight, it became an oil country. And we were not ready for that. We had to rely on a lot of American companies to come and help us explore and produce oil in Venezuela. As a result of that, many people had to be trained. A lot of migrant workers came into Venezuela. And it really marks the beginning of oil dependency, which is a curse, in my opinion, because Venezuela has relied on oil for so long. It never really had put money away for a rainy day fund. It's still the same old story. The photo on the left is, I'm from Maracaibo. I lived near Lake Maracaibo during the early exploration days. This photo is from the 1935, I believe. There were 15,000 oil wells in the lake. Yeah, 15,000 oil wells. I lived in my barrio. And we were about 2 blocks from the lake behind us. Nobody ever went there. There were big signs saying this lake is polluted. You can see oil patches and trash. The water was like green. So it really, in terms of environmental awareness, there was none. Yeah, those are the days where 15,000 oil wells. I don't know how many there are now operating, but so that's the beginning of oil dependency, which plays a huge role in the creation of this exodus. So keep in mind, oil prices are high, times are good. Oil prices are down, times are bad. It's as simple as that. So we jump into 1958. So 1935 to 58, there was some democratic movements in Venezuela. There was also a brief period in which the best writer in Venezuela was the president. Romulo Gallegos was the president. So there was a brief period of democracy, and he chose to run for presidency. But he didn't last very long because another dictator came along and took him down. So democracy really begins at the end of the last dictatorship in 1958 with a general called Marcos Perez Jimenez. So 1958, the political parties in Venezuela got together and they said, let's form a democracy, which lasted for 40 years. Venezuela was then living the life, I can say. Oil prices were high, especially in the 70s. It was a rich country, had a democracy, which it was a model, is a good model for democracy in South America. People talked about, some of you have been there during the 70s, can testify to the fact that it was known to be a very rich country uh, and a lot of opportunities for people. The Democratic Party, the stability was caused by two parties, one the center right, center left. They nationalized the oil sector in 1976, right? They said, okay, well, a lot of the revenue has to come to PDVSA, which is an oil company. The PDVSA, PDVSA, became the third largest oil company in the world. But it collapsed with the fall of oil prices. So what doomed the democratic system in 40 years, that lasted 40 years, was the collapse of oil prices in 89. Then Hugo Chavez came and a coup attempt in 92. So that's all I have to say about the democratic period. There's a lot more to say. I want to jump ahead a little bit to change the subject, right? Who has heard of the Catatumbo lightning complex, apart from the concept exchange guys? No, not a lot of people. So in the southwest corner of Lake Maracaibo, you like it that I change the subject. Huh? So it's an area called Catatumbo. Catatumbo really means house destroyer. Catatumbo, I'm going to knock down your house. Catatumbo lightning complex is a complex that, is a rare, meteorological phenomenon. It's a well-known all over the world, but, it flashes up to 40 times a minute, lightning, 9 hours per day, 100 to 160 nights a year, and the total number of lightning strikes is 1.6 million. So this is a meteorological convergence between the Andes Mountains, tropical Caribbean winds, and winds from the western part of the border between Venezuela and Colombia. It's quite interesting. In normal times, I recommend you guys should go and see it, but maybe wait until more stability is around. But this is sort of an interesting phenomenon that only happens in Venezuela. And of course, everybody has heard of El Sistema. El Sistema is a musical system or a music system that provides, that basically the motto is music for social change. They teach classical music education to young students and children even to be part of a team, of an orchestra, to socialize, to learn an instrument. And they become very, very famous. Started in the 1970s. The most famous, representative of that system is Gustavo Dudamel. As most of you have heard of him. Here is playing with a Simón Bolívar Youth Orchestra. I have a video, but I decided not to play it because it takes too long, and I have a lot of things to say. Again, a unique product of Venezuela, thanks to this Music for Social Change program. And we have a El Sistema here in Watsonville, Salinas area, if you really look up their website. So it has propagated all over the world. The truth is, the Venezuelans who are doing well are those who play baseball and who come to the United States. The second most influx, the country that provides the most number of baseball players is the Dominican Republic, of course, but Venezuela is in second. So if you want to look for success stories, even if you don't like baseball, I used to love baseball, you can just look at the 86, whatever I think is the 86 Venezuelan player. That's a story of success as defined by the ability to get out and to have social and economic stability. So I'm not going to ask the names of these players. I know them, but I think some of you may recognize some of these players. And the area where the Angel Falls is in the Tepuy area in the southeast part of the country. I'm sure you've heard of a couple of things. These are tabletop mountains. It's tabletop, like the ones in the middle bottom, on the one on the right. But they're famous. The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle took place on the top of a Tepuy mountain, right? And more recently, the movie Up, I'm sure you watched it with your children or grandchildren. It basically takes place on the Angel Falls, almost. Just wanted to give you a sense of variety in Venezuela. Okay, back to the political history. So remember, we had 300 and 400 years of Spanish rule, then we have the Wars of Independence, and we have caudillos ruling from 1830 to 1935. We have a brief democracy dictatorship from 35 to 58. Then we have 58 to 98 through democratic period. After that came Hugo Chavez. You know, Hugo Chavez led a coup attempt in 92. He's a very important part of the story, as well as the failure of the democratic system. He was he failed in a coup attempt in 92. It was kind of a naive coup attempt. He had, 10% of the army behind him, and he didn't go anywhere. But that brought him to the national spotlight when he was arrested and he was given a chance to talk to the press. He said, for now, I'll obey the orders. For now, that gave people an opening. So every time I hear the word "for now," I'm thinking, try not to use that. For now, he was sent to prison, but parole after 2 years. He formed the Fifth Republic. It's a long story, but to form the political party, which then became the Socialist Party in 2007. He changed the country name to on homage to Simón Bolívar. Right? He called it, instead of calling it República de Venezuela, simple, right? He called República Bolivariana de Venezuela. Bolivariana means Bolivarian. So that's why the picture of Simón Bolívar behind him is important. But here's some of the lessons learned. We're gonna start to talk about lessons learned. As the minute he became president, he made it possible to change the Constitution, right? We had a one-term president for 5 years who will not run again. And a new president coming in after 5 years. He changed it so that he could stay in power for 2 terms, each term 6 years. He changed the first change. And, he wasn't creating a socialist country as we know it. He was more of a social democrat at first. As far as social democracy is what he was going for. And by that, I mean countries like, Nordic countries like Finland, Sweden, Norway. He had that model in mind to create a government that would look after universal health care, free education, and security. But that went out the window in about 2013. The funny thing about Chavez is that he was very charismatic. Very charismatic. He spoke the language of the people. He liked to be in front of TV so much that he created a program called Allo Presidente, right? Live on television for up to 7 hours every Sunday. He will have a program focusing on himself, and his cabinet will be there with him. He will make policy changes on the spot. He will say, one example is he was showing the program on Bolivar Square. Bolivar is everywhere, but it's the main square in Caracas. He had a live TV broadcast from there. And he told the mayor to tell him who owned the jewelry stores that are in front of Simón Bolívar statue. And the mayor said, well, they belong to so-and-so, family A, family B. And Hugo Chavez told him on live television, say, I want those 2 jewelries to be part of the government. I want to appropriate them, write up the paperwork that will make this possible today. So before the program finished, the mayor had a written paperwork ready for him to sign. And the next day, the jewelries were taken by the government. Luckily, the owners knew about this, so they took all the jewelry and everything. They fled. So what I'm trying to say is that there is another message of lessons learned is he tried at the beginning to live with market with the market system and tried to provide universal health care and so forth, but he slowly became disenchanted with the private enterprise, the private businesses. So that example that I just mentioned, when he takes over the jewelries of people who are selling jewelry in Caracas, is an example of appropriation, government appropriation, that he started to do on a more regular basis. That killed the market. Yeah, 7 hours long. How would you like that? No. So, more lessons learned. What did he do? Well, this picture of the oil company in my hometown. When I went, last time I went, one of the times I went, I got from the airport, drove by this building, and it said, "Socialism or death." This is the oil company building, socialism or death. And I'm going, what happened here? So here's what happened. Here, if you look at the literature trying to explain to you what happened, how did the country create this exodus of people, 1 in 4 Venezuelans left? Why? The system was dismantled. The democratic system was dismantled by Chavez. He fired everybody at the oil company. Again, oil company is that manages the income for the country. He put his military friends in power. There was a blacklist created, but all the oil workers could no longer work in Venezuela in general. He created something called misiones. The misiones were like social programs that went into the poor neighborhoods and tried to provide medical assistance. My mother benefited from, I can say, a wandering Cuban doctor. A lot of these doctors are from Cuba. There was a ideological compatibility with Cuba, but also Cuba received cheap oil in exchange of doctors and nurses that would go to Venezuela. It was a good deal that they had. So my mother got a shot, a COVID shot, from a wandering Cuban doctor who walked around the neighborhood with COVID shots. He just knocked on the door. Do you need a COVID shot? Yes, we do. So that was beneficial. The problem with that is that Chavez spent a lot of money on these misiones for the neighborhoods, but he forgot about the actual state institutions like hospitals, public clinics. The money was being channeled towards his local misiones, and the historical apparatus that provided health care was collapsing. There was not a lot of funding. Another lesson learned, he invented something he called the new geometry of power. What does it mean? A city has a mayor, a city has a city council, they are the drivers of the city. He said, no. He created new comunas. He created these communal councils, communals that made decisions for the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the mayor and the city council and the whole apparatus of government, local government, was being defunded. He created this paramilitary wing called colectivos. Colectivos is a militia that are loyal to the president and who are embedded in many, many neighborhoods, and they're funded by the government, and they're given guns for the whole purpose of controlling demonstrations and stifling, protest. One of my cousins got shot and became paralyzed because he was standing by at a demonstration. He wasn't even marching, but a stray bullet hit him, and he became paralyzed. One of my nieces got shot because she was standing. So these colectivos are just random shooting. They just start shooting. The exchange control system was chaotic. It's a long story, I'm not gonna go there. But anyway, the inflation was at a time at 130,000% in 2013. And the last thing he did was the expropriation of private businesses. Keep in mind that this model of government created by Hugo Chavez, the colectivos, the misiones, appropriation of businesses. There were a lot of left-leaning countries in South America who never adopted this model who said, this is Venezuelan socialism, that is your thing to do. You do what you have to do, colectivos, misiones, etc. None of the other countries adopted this model. It was a Venezuelan thing. So examples of from constitution changes to creating power at the neighborhood level to support him. My hometown was featured in an article in the New York Times. 500,000 people out of 2.2. Again, 1 out of 4 people have to leave the country because oil prices decrease. The government decided not to spend a lot of money for the people. A lot of hospitals collapsed by then because they was channeling the money to other enterprises. Houses like this on the right became common. I asked my brothers, is this true? Do you see a lot of these houses abandoned, and then after they are abandoned, people come in and steal whatever they can, including bricks? And just a little map of the exodus that was created because of this economic and social instability. A little brief about an election that happened last year in July 2024, the Constant Exchange talk, the very day before, the winner of the presidential contest fled the country because the government did not acknowledge that the opposition won. So the government basically has these fake elections to show a veneer of democracy, but the fact is they will not accept a defeat. We know that that can happen, right? So I'm just not gonna just briefly mention that. The other side of the coin is economic sanctions, right? We all know that the United States like to impose sanctions on any country. Sadly, 60% of the sanctions are done on poor countries. That's the truth. And Venezuela is up there with the heavily most sanctioned country in the world. So it's something that it irritates me to no end, but by the same token, there's no proof that the sanction had really exacerbated. It's probably a combination of both the sanctions, and the local government and the government impacting the people the most. So a little bit about Venezuela in the news, and I'm looking at the time carefully. Exodus. 1 in 4 Venezuelans have left the country, right? Only countries that have countries that have the same type of exodus are countries at war. Syrian exodus, the Ukrainian exodus. They have reasons to flee the country. Venezuela is a country at peace in general, yet 1 in 4 decided to leave. Economic conditions are so dire that they decided to leave. My family relies on myself and my sister in Miami to survive. We provide everything from food to medicine to therapy. My family is just one of many that depend on money that we send from the United States, Colombia, Ecuador. The money that's sent to Venezuela from abroad is about 6% of the gross domestic product. It's a lot of dollars that are being sent to support the families. The funny thing is that the government knows that there's an exodus of 1 in 4. They don't care. So then it's a release valve. They don't want to be here, they can go. But the government also expects those people who have left to send money back to provide economic fortitude. So it's a vicious cycle. The government doesn't want them, but they want the dollars that are sent back to Venezuela. My family, I have 3 brothers who are believing in the government no matter what. But I always say, isn't it ironic that you're relying on my US dollars to survive? Right? So a little bit about, Venezuelan immigrants in the United States, 1% of the Hispanic population. Guys, it is not an invasion, right? It's not an invasion. Trendiaragua, yes, the bad guys, they came with the exodus. They wanted to extend their business of human trafficking, drug selling. Bad guys are everywhere. They're a very small percentage. Again, we're not being invaded by Venezuelans, right? just to more numbers about where most of them, Colombia. Colombia has been wonderful, really, in terms of, providing sustenance and help to Venezuelan migrants. Some of the other countries, it's difficult. I talked to my cousin in Atlanta, and all the Venezuelans that he talks to, they say, nobody wants to be away from Venezuela. They want to go back. Right? They're here to try to support their families back home. Nobody wants to stay. Oh, a little bit about Tren de Aragua is in the news. That's recently started in 2013. The Exodus helped them expand and grow. They're engaging in criminal activities abroad. May or may not be in cahoots with the government. Why is that important? The National Intelligence Commission released an unclassified report on what is Tren de Aragua doing. Are they working with the Venezuelan government to destabilize the United States? There's no evidence of that. So there's no evidence of the Tren de Aragua, number one, the numbers are small. And number two, there's no evidence that they are like invading the country. There's some pictures. The picture on the left is Venezuelans ready to leave from Venezuela to Colombia. The Colombian borders were about to be open, and everybody is, getting out of Venezuela as quickly as possible, even if it meant to stand thousands of people. And the map on the right is most of the Venezuelans that are in the United States, about 600,000 that live in Florida and Texas. Florida and Texas. Again, there's a very, very small number. Some places to visit, guys, if you want to go. Again, I don't advise it right now, but keep this in the back of your mind when you are going to go. As the Llanos on the top left is the plains, the area of the plains. The Andes Mountains, we are the northernmost tip of the Andes Mountains. Caribbean beaches, what's not to like. And we also have a lot of, alligators on the Orinoco Delta. I don't recommend visiting. But food, we have a place in Santa Cruz called Pana downtown at the Octagon. They sell Venezuelan food. Venezuelan arepas. Arepas is in the top left. They're like pita bread stuffed with good stuff. And we also have tequeños in the top, middle, hallacas in the bottom, middle, and we have a typical Venezuelan dish. It doesn't have the famousness, so to speak, of Mexican food, but it is typical Caribbean food: rice, black beans, plátanos, and some shredded beef, which I don't eat. An animal fact: the capybaras are the largest rodent in the world. They can be up to 108 pounds. Why don't they become pets? They're so docile. People take them as pets in the southern part of the country. It's kind of interesting. They even like ice cream, for Pete's sake. Society has corrupted them. And this is me and my grandson in front of Pana Arepa. The logo of the Pana is capybara. I don't think they cook capybara in there. No, it's just the logo. Just be careful. And this is a story of my cousin Luis. I'm going to finish up with this. He entered the United States in 2021, tried to cross the border 3 times, got caught twice, got sent out. The third, they kept him in prison in 2021. He spent 5 months and 21 days before they processed his application to enter the United States. He was in a prison, wearing a prison uniform, seeing the light of day, 1 hour daily. This is what's called in the news a refugee camp. Don't believe any of that. It's a prison. Finally, myself and another cousin paid a lawyer to try and speed up the process, and we got him out in late 2021. Released to a friend. Now he's working. He has TPS status. He's working for a water pump equipment building, and he's paying taxes. He has a driver's license. Most importantly, he's able to support his own family back in Venezuela. I think most people do that. They walk for miles and miles and miles to come here or any other country to send money back. That's the way it is. So there he is. We came in down from San Francisco, and he is holding the sun, right? Because he's living the happy life. And one thing is, again, warning about AI, I asked AI to create a nice graphic of Venezuela with a capybara in the front, a palafito house on stilts, the Tepuy Mountains, and the Venezuelan flag. And no matter what I did, the Venezuelan flag would always show up in tatters. I don't understand. AI has something against Venezuela also. Because I asked it to make one about the United States, redwood forests, mountain lions, the San Lorenzo River, and it was a beautiful flag, a perfect flag. And I kept trying to make a Venezuelan flag that was not in tatters. So be careful, AI can ruin your dreams there. So anyway, thank you so much.
Questions, anybody?
Hi, thank you so much for that. It was really interesting. You moved pretty fast from Chavez to Maduro, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about like Maduro, like is he a similar kind of dictator?
Yeah, so Maduro came into power about 2014. Chavez died in 2013 of cancer. When Chavez was president of Venezuela, the oil prices were booming. So we can always say that Chavez had a better time of being the president because of the affluence of oil dollars. When Maduro came in, oil prices went down. So he's not the same kind of president. In fact, many people who supported Chavez dislike Maduro. He doesn't have the same charisma. He inherited a country that was in decline. But then he, instead of managing the whatever income was coming to benefit the people, all the money stayed in the inner circles of the government. And that's been proven. So there's a lot of corruption going on. Therefore, the people had to leave to make a living. My sister, who's a doctor, she was making $190 a month. So people like her decided to leave the country. So Maduro is not the same type of president. He is even more, he doesn't have the charismatic chops. And he is even more clear in how he wants to stay in power. And he doesn't care about the safety net for Venezuelans because he allows people to leave and they send money back. So in that case, he's winning, yeah.
Other questions? Oh, got one over here.
Two over there.
Is it true that Chevron and some of the other oil companies are returning to Venezuela?
I actually don't know that. I know their licenses were revoked recently, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the fact is that the United States have benefited from Venezuelan oil for decades. You know, we don't say it out loud, but without Venezuelan oil, believe me, I'm not a big oil advocate. I'm not an oil advocate, but it's the source of income for Venezuela. So I wouldn't be surprised if the United States companies came back, but there will have to be some kind of a deal, right? There be some more freedom of the press, etc.
My daughter was teaching in Venezuela for several years, so I spent a lot of time there leading up to Chavez. And in the schools, most of the school children were daughters of oil people. But the elections were very strange. I looked at the ballots. I mean, there must have been 50 people running for president. And they all had these little pictures and how they were going to do wonderful things. And there was Chavez was out there. And my daughter said, the problem is whoever gets elected, they make all these promises, and they don't carry them out. And the people are pissed off. And that's what she felt led to Chavez's, coming in. And boy, the exodus came. I mean, she was right there in the middle of watching all of these families leaving. But do they still have, I know their elections are rigged now, but this plethora of candidates was insane. I mean, what about the system that allowed him? I mean, he was elected originally.
Yes. Yeah. So Chavez was indeed elected president in '98 because many, as you said, Cindy, population was getting tired of being dependent on promises. You know, the thing about Venezuelans, people in general, Venezuelans in general, is they expect, the government has always said, oil belongs to the people. Venezuelans are used to getting almost free gasoline for many decades. They will pay 5 cents of the dollar to get a full tank of gasoline. They will get some public hospitals free for many, many decades. So they're used to benefiting from the oil. And during Chavez, yes, there was a lot of benefits. The misiones, like they helped my mother, they came and went, but in the process, the local institutions were destroyed. When Maduro had an election last year, as an example, he didn't allow Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the opposition, he didn't allow her to run. That you're forbidden from running. But who's going to run for her party? Someone called Gonzalez, who nobody knew. So these elections are a veneer of trying to pretend that there's a democracy. And there were maybe 4 or 5 different candidates, but the one who won was not elected president. And Maduro said, forget that. Never had any proof that he won. And so it was a sort of a fake election. So right now it is Maduro in power, and that's the way it's going to stay for a while.
First off, thank you very much for an excellent talk. You and I are about the same age, and you had the benefit of private education for your elementary, right?
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could comment how Venezuelan education changed from your youth to the present day.
Well, I don't know much about it, but I can say what my family has told me is that education in the schools changed to reflect more of the Venezuelan ideology aligned with Cuban ideology. And that, you know, is something that inevitably happens when you align yourselves with countries like Cuba for support. The nature of the educational system has changed. Less emphasis on literature, more emphasis on other topics that unfortunately people who get their degree in medicine, they have to leave the country because they can't make a living. So the nature of the education system or the health of the system is really not enough to prevent people from just leaving. So I imagine that the educational system is in shambles, but that's the nature. So the exodus, forgive my pronunciation, happened for the real reasons of instability in all areas of the country. 1 in 4, only a country at war can say there's an exodus like that. 1 in 4 in Venezuela means a lot of internal conflict and instability. That's all it means. Okay.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, now it's my turn to remind everybody that we have this reputation to maintain. We are the beloved group because we leave this place absolutely clean. You can imagine what happens at the end of evenings on Saturday night when parties are held in here and what it looks like on Sunday morning. We don't want to do that. So would you please make sure that everything that's on the floor gets put into the containers that are in the back over there, next to the water container? Number one.